people. This is where most of it happens. This is where I finish my books, just laying around in bed. And I have finished a book. I'm not going to be able to see it, but it's The Campaigns of Alexander. It's written by Arrian. And Arrian was a Greek. He lived in the time of Hadrian, and his father was a Roman citizen, so Arrian was a Roman citizen. Arrian actually rose to command a couple of legions. He's a pretty interesting fellow. 398-page book. It probably would have been 350 pages if Arrian didn't, every time he mentioned somebody's name, he said son of. Like Ptolemy, son of Lagos. There was a lot of Ptolemies there. A couple of them got killed. Ptolemy, son of Lagos, I believe, was the Ptolemy that ends up taking over Egypt. And that's how the Ptolemies got started in Egypt. The Ptolemies are not Egyptian. They're Macedonian. Cleopatra was Macedonian, not Egyptian. My first note here, great intro. There's a 40-page intro to this book, and the intro pretty much tells a little bit about Arrian, tells about what books Arrian had read to compile this, and a lot of the books that Arrian had read are no longer with us. Arrian bases this on mostly on Ptolemy's writings. I got quite a bit of notes in here. It was actually a really, really good book. Not all authors from antiquity are easy to read. Here, Arrian is giving a description of a battle, and it reminds me a lot of the battle descriptions that were in the Song of Roland. I have a note here that, this says omens. A lot of older books will list, one omen after another. An eagle lands on something. There's a lunar eclipse, stuff like that. There's something here that I wanted to read. It just gives a little glimpse into the personality of Arrian. No matter who I am that make this claim, I need not declare my name, though it is by no means unheard of in the world. I need not specify my country and family, or any official position I may have held. Rather let me say this, that this book of mine is, and has been from my youth, more precious than country and kin and public advancement. Indeed, for me, it is these things, and that is why I venture to claim the first place in Greek literature, since Alexander, about whom I write, held first place in the profession of arms. I've got a lot more. The more that I read this book, the more interested in Arrian I became. And I've got a lot more little personal things like that. He talks about the knot here. Alexander untying the great knot, or striking it with his sword. And even back in Arrian's day, Arrian is writing about 350 years after Alexander's death. Even in Arrian's day, nobody was sure, whether the story of the Gordian knot was true or not, or how Alexander undid the knot. I just have a little note here. At this point in the book, I'm at page 128. Alexander has not had his final battle with Darius. Darius hasn't been killed by his own people yet, and Alexander and Darius are writing letters back to each other. And here, this is one of the letters, it's the last paragraph in a letter that Alexander sends back to Darius. I'm going to read this. And in future, let any communication you wish to make with me be addressed to the king of all Asia. Do not write to me as an equal. Everything you possess is now mine. So, if you should want anything, let me know in the proper terms, or I shall take steps to deal with you as a criminal. If, on the other hand, you wish to dispute your throne, stand and fight for it, and do not run away. Wherever you may hide yourself, be sure I shall seek you out. The siege of Tyre, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, Tyre. Very interesting. Alexander and his men had to build a causeway. Tyre is located on an island, and just a very interesting siege. That's the first time that they mention Carthaginians. Alexander never goes to war with the Carthaginians, and a couple times in the book, he has cause to meet Carthaginians, or almost meet Carthaginians, but they never go to war. I think if Alexander would have lived, he would have went further west along the coastline of Libya. Here's where Alexander goes, and he meets with these prophets. I know it as Siwa. They don't call it Siwa here, but he goes there, and I've read a couple of books about Alexander. This one doesn't explain it the exact same way. In the other book that I read, Alexander asks the seer information about who killed his father. The seer says, it is impossible for your father to be killed. And that's how Alexander gets the idea that he is the son of a god. This note here says a word about numbers. It's talking about a battle that he had with Darius. I can't pronounce it anyway. But they talk about Darius having 1 million men. And here they say that the Macedonians killed 300,000 of Darius' men. That's an awful huge number. And they also say that Alexander lost like 100 of his men. So, a word about numbers, everything gets greatly exaggerated. What do you want?
I want to show you something about the butterfly.
Okay, well, I'm right in the middle of this, honey. This is going to take me like 15 minutes.
All right, the tongue rolls out immediately when he comes out, and it goes like this, and I want
Nice.
to show you. Yeah, so they must all do that. We just miss it,
All right. She's hovering about there while I'm trying to do this. They're talking about a small battle here, and Alexander gets hit by a missile, and when they say missile, in this case, I think they're talking about a rock that gets thrown, and he gets hit in the shoulder with it. But it also says that Craterus is wounded by an arrow. Now, I read another book called Ghosts on the Throne, and this other book starts pretty much with the death of Alexander, and it goes through what all his lieutenants went through after that, because they all kind of got divvied up pieces of the empire. Craterus, I'm pretty sure, wounded by the arrow means he was shot right in the eyeball with an arrow. And in this other book, it says that he broke the thing off and continued with his assault on the walls. So that had to have been a fairly alarming picture there. Somebody coming at you, swinging a sword with the shaft of an arrow sticking out of their eye. Okay, here's some of the personal notes from Arrian. I can't find it, and I'm not going to bother with it, I guess. More personal observations from Arrian. this is the one. Personally, of course, I should not like to state categorically that the Theban or the Tyrian or the Egyptian Heracles did in fact go to India. I incline to fancy that he did not, for it seems to me that people like to make difficulties look much more difficult than they really are, and to this end start a legend about Heracles. Heracles is the same as Hercules. Start a legend about Heracles' failure to overcome them. That, at any rate, is my opinion about this rock. The name of Heracles was introduced simply to make the story more impressive. The circumference of 8 Ornos is said to be about 25 miles at its height, not including the peaks, nearly 8,000 feet. There is only one way up. It's a difficult path, hewn from the rock. At the summit, blah, blah, blah. Arrian looks at some of the mythology of the day with a very critical eye. And here's another spot. In the country on Alexander's route between the river Kofin and Indus lay the city of Nysa, supposed to have been founded by Dionysus at the time of his conquest of the Indians. Nobody knows, however, who this Dionysus was, nor the date of his invasion of India, nor where he started from, and I myself should hardly care to say that if this Theban deity marched with his army against the Indians from Thebes or from Tmolus in Lydia, or how it was that after passing through the territories of so many warlike peoples unknown to the Greeks of that date, he fought and conquered only the Indians. However, one should not inquire too closely where ancient legends about the gods are concerned. Many things which reason rejects acquire some color of probability once you bring a god into the story. So, after I read that paragraph, I thought, Arrian may have been an atheist. And an atheist just means you reject the gods. Whether it, whatever the flavor of the month happens to be. Arrian here is talking about, he's talking about some tree species and what they look like and how high they grow. And at this point, they're on, Alexander's army is on ships and they're sailing down the river. It just must have been a wonderful earth at that time. This is like 325 BC. Not all of it. Greece and England had pretty much been deforested at that time. Greece kind of deforested their area just to build boats. England, I don't know what the hell was going on there, but they deforested England also. Europe, Asia, Africa, it was all pretty much pristine. So, in BCE, these areas must have just been fantastically beautiful. And people say, oh, well, you wouldn't have wanted to live back then because the life expectancy wasn't the same. That's not really true. If you made it through maybe your first 9 years, you could expect to have just as long a life as we have now. Their food was probably better for you. I'm going to stop. Great book. This one's going on the shelf. Thanks.